Hey guys, what's going on? This is Dan here from UFC. We're here to do our first ever book club. We're reading the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And if you've been following along, then hopefully watching us three awkward people talk would be fun. If not, then leave some comments down below about how awkward we are. Cool. So with me, I have my two lovely creative assistants, Ashley and Jackie, or Jackie and Ashley. Or not Jackie, not Jackie. My apologies. They help me with all the content for UFC and the website and all that jazz. So cool. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So this is our first time ever doing this, so we're gonna kind of wing it and hear what you guys think about it or not think about it, and go from there. Cool. So the first chapter is entitled "Domestication and the Dream of the Planet." What do you guys think about the word usage of domestication?
So I'll just start off by saying that when we kind of think of domestication, we relate that to like pretty much like our household pets, could even be like birds that we have and all that kind of stuff. Basically like any domestic thing, we automatically assume animals because those are the things that humans have domesticated. But the way Ruiz uses the word domestication in the chapter and in the book as a whole, he means that towards us, like we are domesticated by society. And I found that really interesting because, we don't find ourselves domesticated because, we think we're the top of the top when it comes to us
the food chain or whatever.
Well, and like you said, it's weird because we are domesticating ourselves. Like everything else is domesticated by us, like animals. So it's weird that humans are doing it to humans without even realizing it.
Yeah,
that's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically the idea of like being conditioned by society, being conditioned by those close to us. But I think using the word domestication, I think really hammers it home that when we are young, we're innocent. Like we have no choice or no say to who we love, who we trust, who we believe is telling us the truth. Whoever is teaching us and guiding us and filling our book of laws with these agreements, we don't have a choice of who does that, right? So I think the usage of the word domestication makes it that much stronger that we don't have control of who is quote unquote conditioning us. I do think it's very interesting of the idea that Reese brings up of how our world or our society is this dream planet, and how that relates potentially to, or not potentially, how it relates to the dynamic between the Book of Laws, the judge, and the victim. I'm curious to see if you guys think the same thing as I do. So, yes, go for it.
Well, I mean, he talks about like the dream of the planet it's just a big fog of like everybody's dreams and everybody's opinions and agreements. And so the dream of the planet is kind of doomed. So if you are following society's dreams for your own personal dream, you may or may not be successful. So that's why he talks about like the four agreements and how to not follow the dream of the planet, how to make your own dream. And I think kind of like what you were saying, from a young, innocent age, we just learn based on like kind of being forced information instead of really being given the tools to think for ourselves and to think critically and make those decisions for ourselves. So I think that's a solution to, the current way that people learn, and instead of like forcing it, just teaching them how to actually develop their own opinion on something.
Yeah, I agree. I like the way you said that the dream of the planet is doomed. Yeah. Because it's like, I mean, in reality, the dream of the planet is not everybody's. We're all kind of struggling to
And it's always
that.
changing. It's always changing. So how can you really like follow the dream of the planet when, it's like trends in society and celebrities, like everything's always changing, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So you're going to never be happy with yourself and your own dream if you're constantly trying to go off of someone else's.
Yeah, awesome. And I think, Reese also talks about how the dream is kind of what we define as how we get the attention of others, right? How there's this mirror in front of us of who we should really be in order to fit into this dream that society has imposed on us from our youth. Um, and how then the judge is the one kind of like reminding us constantly of what this dream actually is and what this like unattainable reflection is. Um, I find it interesting because when we talk about the book of law as a judge, the victim, it's just us. It's just all of our internal ways of processing and thinking about the world. It's just us. Do you guys relate to this idea of book of law as judge and victim in any sense?
Oh yeah, especially growing up around an immigrant family, we all have these expectations, especially when it comes to who you're associating with, who you're dating, what career you're deciding on as well. A lot of immigrant parents,
What language they speak?
yeah, and especially if you're first gen, second gen child, they a lot of family members kind of don't see you as like to me, I'm like Mexican American, so some of my family members, like uncles, aunts, grandmas, grandpas, they don't see me as like Mexican enough, and some other family members don't see me as American enough. So it's like I'm constantly like in this dream of the planet in a sense where, I have all these expectations that I can't exactly meet because we're not the same. So.
No, I think it's very interesting. I think it's very relatable to a lot of immigrants in general. I think.
Yeah.
I think the idea of being stuck between two worlds and having these agreements set by our parents, set by those close to us that we may not feel very aligned to. And I think like as we get older, right, we actually develop wisdom to acknowledge that some of the book of laws that were set prior to us or given to us prior to wisdom is kind of full of duty.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Ashley?
Well, I think like relating to what Jackie said, if you're always trying to follow the dream of the planet, you're never going to win. And that's where you start to lose who you really are. And I feel like it's kind of like when something is so cliche, you kind of like lose the meaning of it. And I think really understanding of like who you are, that's like way deeper than it actually sounds like. And so many people I feel like struggle with actually knowing who they are because they're constantly trying to fulfill someone else's idea of them. Like Jackie was saying, like she can kind of lose sight of who she really is if she's constantly trying to be who her, who one side of the family feels she is and then the other family. So that's the effect that the personal dream has on people, I think, is them losing sight of themselves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the first like official chapter or agreement is being impeccable with your words. I guess how has that been relatable to you guys, to your daily lives? How is that relatable to, some of the struggles that you guys have in general?
Well, to be impeccable with your words, it's a really strong statement because we're our own worst critic, essentially. So we constantly tell ourselves, these negative things, and we're being impeccable in that sense, but we're also kind of feeding our personal hell as well. So to apply it to my personal life, I just try to be more positive and have more reasonable expectations about being impeccable with my own words, not only to myself, but also like to others.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought about being impeccable with your word, another thing that he talks about in that chapter is the power of the word. So not only how you're being impeccable with your word, but like truly the power of like what others say to you and what you say to others. And it starts with yourself, because if you have a negative, view on yourself, and that's how you talk to yourself, that's the kind of energy or the kind of poison that you're going to spread to people, and vice versa. If someone says something rude to you, it truly is their own problem because they have a problem with themselves. And so that's why they're spreading that negativity to you. So I think that's like another really important aspect of being impeccable with your word is really understanding the power that your words have, like to other people, and the power that it could have onto you, and being mindful of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think you mentioned a good point about being impeccable to yourself. And I think what the book does a lot is reaffirm the importance of like self-love and being able to acknowledge your own capacities and being able to set the right expectations like Jackie was talking about so that you can actually follow through with what you're hoping to accomplish. I think, what I thought was really interesting because when we think about any of these agreements, being impeccable, and we'll talk about, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, etc. I think these are all pretty kind of cliche, commonsensical things that we were all taught growing up to some semblance, right? It's kind of like a couple years ago, there was this whole YOLO movement of you only live once, etc. These all kind of sound like that. So how does actually reading this book make it sound less cliche and actually have more application?
I think it's more of like a reminder because I feel like as we go through life and life itself gets more complicated as we grow older, we kind of forget the essentials, to put it that way. Like it's important to be impeccable with your word. It's super important to also just not take things seriously because it's something that we forget as we get older. And I think it's just a good reminder to reinforce that.
Yeah, and like not only is it a reminder, but he goes, I think, in enough depth about each agreement that you can actually relate that to your personal life. Like he'll explain what it is and what your current situation probably looks like if you're not following that agreement. And so he talks about if you're not impeccable with your word, you might gossip, you might be affected easily by other people's poison. And so a lot of people can be like, oh wow, I do that. Like, and that's how you fix that problem.
Yeah, and I think at least for me when I was reading this book, one of the really important parts that I got from this chapter was the idea of having a very strong self-identity. So like really knowing who you are. And when you really know who you are, the fear or the toxins or kind of the gossiping or etc. that other people might do, you actually have like this barrier that prevents all that stuff from going into and affecting your own life because you know who you are, you know what you believe, and you know what you stand for. And I think that was actually one of the things that with the idea of being impeccable with your word and being impeccable with yourself was not something that I really even considered, is that when you truly know who you are and you truly know what you want, then and only then does other people's opinions, even though it's into consideration what other people think, doesn't actually affect you. What do you guys feel about that?
I agree.
Yeah, I think that just goes back to the example of what Jackie was talking about, that if she feels very strong about her personal goals and her personal identity, then, like you said, she'll take it into consideration what her family is saying because their opinion is valued, but it doesn't shape who she is and what she thinks of herself and her own word with herself.
Nice. One quick thing that I thought of right now was that, like as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, there's been so many ideas that I've had, and I think that everybody around me kind of influences these ideas, and I kind of go in a million different directions. And I think that when I read this chapter about being impeccable with your word and actually really knowing what you want and you're saying that to yourself and sticking to it, I think that's what's really made like the biggest changes in my life. I mean, I haven't read this book since recently, but the biggest changes in my life recently in the last 2 years has been really committing to what I believe is important and actually sticking to that. So I think let's go on and move on to the next chapter, which is what is it?
Well, so that was chapter 2. Chapter 2 was be impeccable with your words. So it's chapter.
Yeah,
Chapter
so
three
moving to
is
chapter
the
3 now.
Second agreement.
So don't take things personally. I take things personally all the time, and I guess I can talk a little bit about that. I think when you're not really committed, you're not really sure about the things that you do or the things that you want, you're not impeccable to yourself. Whenever there's any objections, there's a lot of like defensiveness because you're trying to justify that what you're doing is the correct way of doing things. Even though like there's this little voice in the back of your head that's saying, hey man, maybe it's not, you should probably listen. But because I'm so like fixated on certain things that then I take things personally and I get angry, I get frustrated, I get mad with myself, and I end up not getting to where I want to get to, and I get distracted. I'm sorry for that to you guys, I guess, but but I guess for you guys, how do you guys relate to this chapter?
Well, I think it's really important to have a strong self-identity, like we were just talking about, and all of the agreements, they really go hand in hand. And I think the order is like significant on how he explained them. But if you have a strong identity, then when someone does give you criticism or feedback, it's not a hit to your self-identity. It's just you listen to it and then you make that decision what you want to do with that information. Do you think it was valuable enough and you need to change what you were doing? But regardless, it's not a hit to your own ego or how good you are of a person. So I think that's often what happens when people take things personally. It's like a hit to themselves when that's not the case.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely a hit.
I think I have a good quote here with what Ruiz wrote in the book. He says, if they tell you how wonderful you are, they're not saying that because of you. You know you're wonderful. I think that's a pretty strong statement because...
Thanks. Just kidding.
Because it's like, they'll tell you, and it doesn't have to be like a compliment. People could tell you negative things or negative and both positive things, but it's up to you to realize if what they're saying you're going to take it personally or not. I mean, that's what the Second Amendment is all about. Not amendment, agreement. That's what the Second Agreement is all about. So you don't have to take anything personally, and you shouldn't take anything personally because it's your own truth. It's what you know.
Yeah, and like after that quote, he talks about that it's not necessary to believe other people that tell you you're wonderful. So it goes both ways, like good and bad. But like the point is that people's opinions don't define you. It's nice and you can take a compliment and you can consider feedback, but that overall doesn't shape like who you are and what your identity is just because someone says something.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you're wonderful.
I mean, it still feels good.
And it can.
So the next agreement is don't make assumptions. So I think that, the first opening paragraph of this agreement, let me actually find it really fast. I thought was pretty interesting. So let me go ahead and read it. So we have a tendency to make assumptions about everything. The problem with making assumptions is that we believe they are true. We could swear they are real. We make assumptions about what others are doing or thinking. We take it personally. Then we blame them and react by sending emotional poison, etc. So yeah, I mean, I think that, assumptions are generally just the agreements that we have internally with ourselves, and we don't confirm or clarify those assumptions clearly with those around us. And the lack of that communication, sometimes leads individuals, like in the book, Ruiz talks about how sometimes guys make an assumption that, if a cute girl smiles at you, that they're interested or that they have a crush or something. But in reality, they're probably just a nice human being, and the guy is thinking too much, and he's kind of diving into, hey man, I think I gotta hit her up and get married, have kids or whatever, and like kind of develop this whole narrative off of one simple assumption. So So I thought that was pretty interesting. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going off of what you were saying about the assumptions that guys make, especially like I've seen stories on social media where, you know, someone is a barista or they just work in customer service and that's their job, just to be nice. So they get a lot of like customers that make the assumption that they like them just because they're doing their job effectively. So yeah, I mean, it's relatable. You know, especially for my personal life, I make assumptions a lot about people that are close to me. So as a result, I don't ask important questions, and there's a lack of
Or
communication.
any questions?
Yeah. So there's this lack of communication that needs to be addressed, and I think it's good that Ruiz puts this importance on communication because that's what it leads to.
Yeah, and something else that he talks about in this chapter, he says that we already have rejected ourselves, and before we even gave them the chance to reject us. So that's the whole point about not making assumptions is you'll go so far with a story in your own head on how someone's thinking or feeling about something, and you're going through all those emotions for no reason when that's not even like the reality of the case. So he says to just really make sure that you have clear communication and seek to understand, ask people questions. If you're confused about something, don't just assume that a girl who smiles at you wants to have your number. Maybe look at the context a bit more.
Yeah.
So have you guys practiced any of these 3 agreements in your lives so far?
I do my best. I think the hardest agreement to apply for myself is don't make assumptions, because I accidentally do it all the time. And I don't realize it until after, when they're like, why did you assume that? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no reason. But yeah, it's one of the most hardest things for me. But so it's just constantly a work in progress.
I think that an agreement that I practice is being impeccable with my word. I try really hard to be mindful about what I say to people because I know that the power like that words really do have on people. And I also do try to be as straightforward as possible. That's just like how I am as a person. That's how I communicate with my family and just with anybody. It's kind of blunt, but it's just very straightforward. So there's no room for assumptions that they could make if I'm as straightforward and as clear as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I think, one of the things that, I really got from the initial 3 agreements is kind of the idea of just slowing down and taking the time to process and think through things. And, for sure, I think like even now when I'm communicating with family members or my girlfriend or anybody else in my life, I try my best to take the time and really slow down and ask questions and, think things through really carefully before I really respond and say anything. So, I definitely feel like, especially, because I think, we started reading this book a couple weeks ago, right? So it's definitely affected how I react to a lot of situations. Because I think I'm definitely a very sensitive at times kind of guy. I get very sensitive when it comes to, family and my significant other, etc. So I think that for sure, like the don't take things personally, be impeccable, don't make assumptions. Those all kind of apply to me personally.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, for sure. So I guess that wraps it up for the first book club. But we will continue this, I believe, in like 2 weeks or so. And if you like what we talked about, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment down below, and we will talk to you guys soon.
All right. See you guys
Bye.
next time.